All right. The week began with the inauguration. We all talked on Monday. It ends with the White House appointment of a new chief of staff, Mark. What does the new team, what does the language you heard this week tell you about the president that Barack Obama wants to be?
I think, like all re-elected presidents, he sees a mandate, an expanded vision of a mandate from the electoral victory, but he realizes his time is short, and I think he is not showing the same level of patience with the Congress that he showed in his first term, a certain impatience, a realization that probably this is his best year, in all likelihood, if history's any guide. I think he's been more sure-footed and I think a happier warrior, as I said earlier. And I think the people, Dennis McDonough, whom he's chosen to be his chief of staff, is somebody whom he likes, whom he's comfortable with, very much in his comfort zone. And probably the only person ever to be White House chief of staff who was a safety for John Gagliardi, the winningest coach in college football history at St. John's in Minnesota.
We knew he'd have some
trivia. Actually, many cornerbacks were also chiefs of staff. He, as my colleague Peter Baker said, it's stirred, not shaken. So he has not taken new people from outside.
I mean, I said a new team, but it's almost...
It's all the same people. They're just in different chairs. And a lot of people got promoted. Some people like Geithner left. But he, we know Obama by now. He does not like to bring in flesh blood. He likes people who he can trust. He likes people like McDonough who would, throw themselves on a grenade for the guy. They are extremely loyal, extremely devoted, extremely trustworthy, and they're not going to leak. And so he sticks with those people, and he's been doing it since he became president. As for his term, I sort of think he's in danger, through no fault of his own or only halfway, of really wasting these few months, which are the precious months of a second term, on budget stuff. We're going to have a series...
Wasting it.
Well, I think we're going to have a bunch of squabbles with that. The chances of us getting any tax reform or entitlement reform are minuscule. And so we'll probably find some mediocre fix for the reconciliation of the budget stuff. But we'll spend relatively little time on the big stuff. I think, judging still by the inauguration, he's thinking the long term. He's thinking the Republican Party is extraordinarily weak. I'm going to try to go around the country and try to build a new majority on pretty liberal terms. And it's not about passing legislation over the next 4 years. It's about really weakening the other side and building up my side.
What do you think about? And, speaking of the Republicans, here they are meeting. They're having their annual meeting in Charlotte. And we've talked about this, too, their weakness. You just mentioned it again. They're trying to figure out how their position going forward.
Yeah, I do think that the president, at least implicitly and tacitly, recognizes mistakes that he made in the first term. I think that the emphasis, the reappointment of Richard Cordray and Mary Jo White at the Securities and Exchange Commission is an acknowledgement that in 1989, when we had the savings and loan scandal in this country, 724 savings and loans went under. It cost the taxpayers $87 billion. 1,000 savings and loan executives went to jail. 1,000. And this TARP and the bailouts of the banks has left us with $800 billion, or well over 700 to the taxpayers. And you could count on two hands the number of bankers who've. So I think there's a sense that he did not address this. His administration was not aggressive in the first term. He wants to be in the second term. As far as the Republicans are concerned, Jeff, they're simply going through the terrible stages that every defeated party does. And one side says we lost because we didn't stick enough to our principles, and the other side says we lost because we were too dogmatic and didn't reach out to the undecided. And so the first inclination is always to blame your own candidate. You blame Al Gore if you're a Democrat in 2000, or John Kerry in 2004. You blame John McCain. The Republicans want to blame Mitt Romney. That's fine, but Mitt Romney is more popular than the Republican Party. I mean, he got 47%. The Republicans, are dead in the water right now. So they're going through a difficult period, and they've got to try and figure out they can't talk to Latinos, the fastest growing group in the country. They're basically not conversational with younger voters. The Asians have left them in droves. They're an aging white party in a country that is less white each year.
You followed Bobby Jindal down there, gave a speech last night. He said, we're fighting the wrong fight. And that's one side of what Mark's
Right.
talking about.
Yeah, the Jindal speech is actually interesting because I think it's a sign that a lot of Republicans, a lot of smart Republicans like Jindal understand the problem. But the Jindal speech is still, it's as if conservatives have learned to speak a special language within themselves about government and about, attacking liberal media, all the normal code words. And so Jindal said some smart things in the abstract. We got to stop being a stupid party. We got to try to talk to outsiders. But he's still locked within the prism of those code words. And so does he tell a story about what it's like to be a waitress in Ohio or what it's like to be a struggling Hispanic worker in Texas? He doesn't talk that language. It's all about government. It's all about term limits. It's the old code words. So it's actually very hard to get outside the mental framework you've grown up in. And the party is still stuck in that framework, and I imagine it will be for months and maybe even years. It takes pain to force yourself. The key, it's not genius. If you want to win elections, you have to get people who didn't vote for you to vote for you. And so focusing it and listening to those people who didn't vote for you is a step. And Republicans still haven't taken that step. The people who are not already in your community, what are they saying? That's a step.
Dave, just to pick up one thing David pointed, there is the whole inclination is, what's the gimmick? There must be some gimmick. Oh boy, it's social networking. It's micro-targeting. It's
the electoral college.
Yeah, electoral. Yeah, it's got to be something we can do that way. That the other side's doing. It was radio with FDR. Republicans said, God, he's good on radio, and Democrats said, geez, Ronald Reagan's good on television. If we can get somebody as good on TV as he is, instead of that moment of introspection. Saying people found the other side, our opponents, to be more relevant, more real, and more plausible to our lives and their lives than they found us. And it's a terrible thing to live with rejection. But a losing party has to say what is it, and what you can't do is blame the voters. And I've heard echoes of that on the side. The voters, that's the 47% of takers. Oh my God, no wonder we can't win if they're all just parasites and worse.
Can I flip us into foreign policy? Because also this week there was Hillary Clinton testifying finally on Benghazi, and then hearings for John Kerry. First on Benghazi and Hillary Clinton, is that still a live issue?
I never thought it was a live issue. It was something to attack the administration on election season, and there, believe me, there were faults. But it was more a talking point. I think we've reached the final chapter. Hillary Clinton's leaving. I think Benghazi is over. And it was sort of a substitute for having a real foreign policy debate. What struck me about foreign policy this week was John Kerry, in his own testimony, emphasizing the budget and how much the fiscal situation was, A, weakening American prestige because we look like a country that can't run ourselves, and B, is just weakening what we can do around the world. Because we just don't have the resources to do it. And so he very explicitly said that, which is something Admiral Mike Mullen had said when he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
He also brought up things like climate change, food security, a lot of the sort of non-military.
And so I'm a little more skeptical that that's going to really dominate. A lot of people always say, well, non-military stuff will dominate our foreign policy. But when you have to face Iran this year, one way or the other, you're going to be back to pretty traditional power politics.
What do you think?
But he's chosen two people in John Kerry and Chuck Hagel at State and Defense, whose response is not immediate resort to military intervention. Both of them, I think, have records that's clearly established. As far as the Benghazi hearings, it was an embarrassment. It really was. I thought the Republicans on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, especially Senator Johnson of Wisconsin and Senator Rand of Kentucky, Senator Rand Paul, were just, they were lightweights. They were looking at, we went through 9/11 in this country, and not once in any hearing thereafter did any member of this administration, the administration sitting in power then, be questioned by a member of Congress of the other party or their own party about, what was going on, what were you hiding? The presumption that, that somehow you had some information and weren't sharing it. And I thought Hillary Clinton handled herself well. I thought she was a grown-up in a meeting of adolescence, quite frankly.
She gave it back pretty tough at one point, several points, yeah.
If you're going to take Vienna, take Vienna. And if you can't take on Hillary Clinton, don't start. I think we did learn that.
What do you think of her well, the performance this time, but also now we can look back at 4 years. What will stand out about her time?
I think she is regarded as a successful Secretary of State, for sure. The question I would have is what was independent? And this is something I'm frankly ignorant upon, and I think a lot of people who cover this reasonably closely are ignorant. What was a Clinton initiative? What do we say, aside from the foreign policy that was being made by the president, what was the foreign policy she was responsible for? She did a lot of traveling, and she did a lot of talking to people. But what was her initiative? And I confess I have trouble. There was some emphasis on women, and there were some other things like that. But as far as a big shift in American foreign policy where you can say, that was Hillary Clinton's idea, she pushed it through, she executed this policy, it's tough to distinguish anything she did individually from what the president wanted done.
Do you have an answer to that?
I don't. I mean, I think it's a legitimate question. I'm not sure what the great view of the world is. I mean, it's been one of putting out Iraq and Afghanistan and putting those behind us and ending 10 years of war. But beyond that, I mean, and dealing obviously on a day-to-day basis with all the problems that the world puts in front of you, and which they continue to do and will in the next 4 years as well, even more so. But I'm not sure that there was ever sort of a Kissinger overarching theory or strategy. At least it was. I was unaware of it.
We're just in our last 30 seconds, but on this larger question of where now, this rebalancing toward domestic issues, perhaps there's some question of whether we're sort of disengaging. You know, some fears of disengaging. What do you think?
Yeah, I think events will just change that. Like I said, Iran, the Middle East, they never let you down. Something will happen. And so I do not think, we want to disengage. I think bipartisan, but I don't think we're going to get to.
We want to, but we won't get to.
I mean, and we haven't even mentioned China and its new leadership and all that Asia represents in North Korea, South Korea, Japan. I mean, it is everywhere, even before we get to North Africa.
All right. Mark Shields, David Brooks, thank you both very much.